Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Being High with Dualistic Unity, sponsored by Wynk. Wynk, in short, is a seltzer with a wink of THC. I personally have been thoroughly enjoying Wynk recently, whether I'm going on a run, hanging out with friends, jumping on a podcast, or even answering emails. I love drinking Wynk, and I have a feeling you're probably going to like it too because it has the perfect THC to CBD balance. It's light with 0 calories, zero sugar, and none of that alcohol. And it's great whether you're hanging out by yourself or with other people because it has an onset of 10 to 15 minutes. You can get a nice smooth buzz without anything getting too overwhelming for you. So you're about to hear all about Wink in the following episode, but if you want to slurp down on some of your own and can't wait to get your hands on some, make sure to redeem their special offer on their website. That's www.drinkwink.com, www.drinkwynk.com. And make sure to use code DU30 for 30% off and free shipping. Today's episode, we're talking to Angus Rittenburg. He is the co-founder of Warehouse Beverage Co, who has sub-brands Wynk and Countdown, which we'll find out a little bit more about in this episode. But Angus is an awesome dude, someone who I resonate with a lot in terms of his journey with cannabis and getting in and sort of providing that middle ground for people who maybe didn't see themselves as a stoner, but want to dig in and see what it's all about. So this is a really fun chat with Angus.
I fucking loved this conversation. And it's really because of the journey that Angus went through in order to develop the technology that really was the foundation of a lot of what has made Wynk so successful with people, as well as the mentality of being willing to address the complaints or the feedback of the consumers themselves, introducing a new product because they weren't able to fulfill that niche. The whole conversation was just an excellent example of adaptability, willingness to change, willingness to tackle new challenges, willingness to even get into an industry that's got a fairly large stigma around it, just for the sake of seeing an opportunity in that industry because of people within the industry who are looking for a certain solution. And that said, before we introduce this episode, I wanted to mention, if you are like me and you have a tendency of smoking a lot of weed, but not necessarily drinking a lot of water, a good middle ground may be a cannabis-infused drink. And so you may want to consider Wynk or Countdown for that purpose, because it's not fun to be high and dehydrated. True, you may feel a little higher from being dehydrated, but it's not a good kind of higher. So have a drink, get high. You can still have a smoke as well as drinking a cannabis-infused drink. The point is that it's good for you, and frankly, it's really exciting that it's in the industry. So support that shit and enjoy the episode.
Angus, what's up, man?
Not too much. How are you guys?
Doing well. Thanks
well.
for joining us.
Good. Yeah, no problem. Good to meet you, Ray.
Likewise. We can more or less kick off whenever you are ready. We usually do the introductions after for the episode, so this is more or less just a conversation if you're good to go.
I'm good to go.
Awesome.
I actually got a Wynk. I told you I wouldn't participate.
Let's go. Is that
why not? Yeah, cheers.
Fuck yeah, cheers. This is number 3 for me, so I'm feeling
Christ, good luck.
nice and chilling. So we'll see how this goes, but it'll be fun nonetheless.
What do you think of the new flavor?
Is this a new one?
Yeah,
I tried. Yeah. Oh, it's very good. I like this. I think the lime might be my favorite. That's typically my favorite with seltzers, but I tried this summer when I did that little like random ass video. That was a mango, I think. And that was solid because you guys are unique because they're all 0 calories. All the other seltzers I've had have at least, maybe a bit of sweetness, but yeah, it tastes like basically no different than a like really good sparkling water.
Yeah, you've actually been known around here as the mango taco guy because we all saw that video. But it's the perfect type of content and everything we're trying to communicate to consumers. So that video went around pretty well.
That's awesome. Actually, I'd really appreciate it if you could tell our listeners a little bit about that in terms of your intention, how it is you've gone about creating Warehouse and what it is you do.
Yeah, absolutely. With Wynk, the whole point was to create an approachable THC beverage. And, our marketing historically has been a lot about the attributes of the product itself, 1-to-1, 0 calorie, a lot of details. But what we saw from Andrew with his video in New York City was just his inner monologue and his experience trying the product. So we were doing a sampling on the sidewalk in New York City over the summer. And Andrew created a great piece of content, which was him. He grabbed a can, he described his first impression, and then he took it over to a taco shop. And we just got his inner monologue through the whole experience and describing what Wynk was doing. And that's how our marketing has really shifted over the past 6 months or so, is just trying to make it way more about the experience and way less about the technical attributes. But part of that is this whole category is so new for everybody. And a lot of people still don't know what THC will do for them. So we struggle to get through getting really technical. And at the end of the day, none of that matters if the experience is good. And that's what most of our consumers are telling us. They like the experience. They may not know everything about the product, but ultimately they drink it, they like it. It's a good experience. And that's really what the story we want to tell, and the story that Andrew told perfectly.
Agreed. It's really interesting because it's almost oversimplified, I think, in common rhetoric, even if it's positive rhetoric about cannabis. Like, it's going to relax you. It's going to help you with your health and your mental health. It's going to help you get rid of your stress. And that all sounds great until you're in the inner monologue as that's all kind of unraveling. And so
Exactly.
it's really important that we have that conversation about what's going on inside, about the fact that it's not just cannabis driven. It's part of our life. It's part of how we've learned to think about ourselves that we're dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, this hemp derived shift that sort of started over the past year, originating in Minnesota, has brought the product into places that non-cannabis consumers are, like liquor stores. But, in our marketing, when you start talking about the endocannabinoid system and all these technical attributes, I think you lose a lot of these consumers because they're so far from that. And so what we try and do is just keep it simple. And we try and tell the story through influencers, through customers, and a lot of the content they create. And I think that's been a lot more impactful for people.
Far more of the show, don't tell, right? And I've definitely taken that in. And even, talking with brands like you guys, I think a lot of with cannabis, because there's still that stigma out there. Even, someone like me who does pretty much consume just about every day, I still have a hesitancy to share that or express that or show that. But that's just shifting with us. And so I think for me, like, just sharing those types of things, and I think for brands too, like, that's really where a lot of the connection is found, because if it's shown that, like, oh, this can be your experience right now, and there's going to be, as Ray was alluding to, it's going to be ups and downs, but it's just something that we don't necessarily understand. So the more that it's shown like that and expressed, and then someone sees that and it's like, oh, this this brand right here is my way of doing it, like there has to be a means to getting there, and like there doesn't, because a lot of it just comes down to your willingness to relax in response to a shift or a little bit of discomfort. But it's cool to see more and more brands kind of showing that side of things, and it's exciting to see the shifts for sure, and to see companies like you kind of leading the way.
Yeah,
in that shift.
Yeah, it is cool. It's cool to see it become mainstream and accessible to everybody. But when we started Wynk three or so years ago, just like anybody, we started trying to create a product and just experiment and see what worked. But I'm an interesting person to do this, because if I smell weed, I'm high, like super sensitive to cannabis in all forms. And we started formulating early versions of the drink. Some were higher dose, some were lower dose, but it really hit me, no pun intended. We did a 2.5 milligram sample, and I went out to visit my parents in Montana, and we were cross country skiing, and I had one of these samples and I drank it. And what really struck me was, like, it didn't make me stoned. It didn't like completely alter the experience. It just enhanced it. So, like, was I really high? No. Was I out of control? No. Were things more vibrant? Yes. Were things more funny? Yes. But still totally in control of the experience. And I think that's when I realized, like, man, there's definitely something here, especially on the low dose side, that would be really compelling to a lot of people. And that's the stigma that I think we all collectively need to break through, is like, cannabis used in small doses is really approachable. And people can stay in control and use it just as an enhancement to their experiences, not as a way to totally change it.
You know, and it's so funny because a lot of people who are anti-cannabis would say that what you just said is absurd. How
Yeah.
would we use a drug like that consistently throughout our lives and just vary within the spectrum, to which you can just point out sugar? You know, that's very much what we do with sugar. We have sugar to a greater or lesser degree, but it's pretty much always in our life, isn't it? And sugar is very much a drug. It's
Yep.
very much a mind-altering substance. So I think a big part of this is just, again, how foreign it is from our current mentality, from the way that we currently live. You know, like one thing I've noticed, especially throughout my life, is that if I'm super tense and I smoke even just half a joint, I get really, really high. But if I'm relaxed and I smoke even a full joint by myself, I'm generally okay. And it's the gap in
Yep.
between that really messes with me. It's that resistance. And so being able to work your way into the process, being able to have a low dose. And what's funny is that even on a low dose, if you're super tense, it might be a little bit of a rocky experience for you,
Right.
but at least it's low enough that you know you can get through. Just for the psychological fact, it's only 2.5. I'll be all right. I'll be all right.
Yep. Yeah. No, and I think, the other cool thing to see is the market evolving to support sort of all consumers. So what we're seeing is the hemp-derived space opening up for low-dose beverages in liquor stores, which is great because you can have the uneducated consumer go in there and try a product, and it's not going to completely rock their world, but they'll start to understand what THC does. On the other side of it, of course, the dispensaries allow for higher dose products. So it gives consumers a way to evolve from a new cannabis user with an approachable product, but then work their way up to whatever they want through dispensary. So that's what, Warehouse and Wynk and Countdown have a long, a long history and a long evolution. But we started with Wynk in the low dose category. And, initially we were trying to sell it through dispensary, but that was a hard sell because most of the dispensary consumers want to get high. So we added another brand with sort of a totally separate premise called Countdown. And that was the really flavorful, a little bit of sugar, get you stoned product. And we continue to produce and sell that for dispensaries. So we have a 25 milligram, a 50 milligram, and 100 milligram. And then Wynk is really focused on the mainstream channel. So try to, through all these different channels, try to offer customers a whole journey to give them what they ultimately want.
That is awesome. I'm probably going to have to try something from Countdown when I'm down in the States next.
Yeah.
One thing it reminds me of actually is how microdosing changed the common perspective of psychedelic mushrooms. For me, when I was younger, I had experienced a psychedelic experience. I had a lot of psychedelic experiences, but it was always in the gram or above range. And admittedly, the idea of a trip is what scares most people off. It's what scares them away of ever trying it because it sounds so big. Oh my God. Right. Whereas the idea of microdosing, and I had no idea because I had been a parent for like 10 years, totally out of the scene, totally sober, doing that thing. I come back, I'm on TikTok and everybody's talking about microdosing in milligrams. I'm like, that's adorable. I've never heard of that before. But all of a sudden it was acceptable. All of a sudden now there was a whole new conversation about it. And there are companies here in Canada that are doing psychedelic therapy using microdosing. Hell, we talked to a company, Myco Meditations, that gives people 5 and 10 gram doses as their first trip. So not everybody's going to want to have that giant deep plunge. And I think Wynk is a really good middle ground.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm really interested to see where the mushroom market goes and the regulations go. I think that's a very compelling, the future compelling product for people. I'd love to see microdose mushroom in beverage.
For sure. Yeah, I'm very excited for that. And it's fun too, because the industry is shifting and changing so quickly. And it's fun that even this podcast right now, Wynk right now, we're in the middle of the shift of what's changing and what's going on. And so it's cool to see. And I know you guys have a little bit of a mobile production unit, or that's a big part of where you came from. And so I can only imagine with your ability to stay agile in the market, the mobile production units makes a whole lot of sense, but also just your ability to realize, oh, there's another ask, so we'll throw in Countdown, and now we have Wynk and Countdown, and just to see. And so how much do you think that ability to stay agile and utilize the mobile production units is a big part of how you guys kick things off, has played a role in you guys being able to stay relevant in a very quickly changing and shifting
Yeah.
industry?
No, that's been everything for us, agility. Like the regulations evolve weekly in all our markets. They change on a state by state basis. New York, New York is very volatile. But yeah, our ability to shift and sort of change the business quickly is the reason we're still alive. And the business everybody sees today is so different from where we started, and it's unrecognizable. But when we founded Wynk at the very beginning, it was actually a business created because of a technology that we had. And I can dive into that. It's a long story, but I think it's pretty interesting.
I would really appreciate it if you would, because I personally, I'm very curious as to the mobile unit, what brought that about, where the inspiration was, and of course, what you were dealing with in the market that made that such an appropriate response.
Yeah.
But yeah, do share the long story.
There's three founders for Wynk, and one's Sean Sheehan, the other's Casey Barzik, and then myself. But we were together in a room just batting around ideas for a new business venture. This was late 2020, kind of coming out of COVID. And Sean is an energy trader. That's his main business. And his life is basically finding discontinuities in the markets for energy or disruptions, and then making the right trades and the right bets to capitalize on it. So he saw the cannabis space just getting completely shifting, kind of tail end of the CBD boom. Dispensary stuff was starting to pick up. And then the other co-founder, Casey, he cut his teeth in beverage, distilled spirits, and had built a business selling distilled spirits in Pennsylvania. And then my background was in technology, doing design of products and design of manufacturing for some of the big tech companies and a bunch of startups. But I had come out of battery design at Tesla, doing a lot of the mechanical and some electrical design for the Model 3. So Sean asked the question, like, this marijuana industry looks interesting. What can we do? And then Casey's like, well, beverage is a pretty compelling way to deliver THC, but very hard to do because there was, in late 2020, a pretty challenging interstate commerce issue where you had to produce these products at every state that you sold. You couldn't ship across state lines. And so for traditional products like gummies or vapes, fairly easy to do, small production systems. For beverage, it's very hard. These are very expensive facilities. They take a long time to build. And so he looked at me and said, the beverage problem is pretty hard. How do you solve it? And I kind of penciled out an idea for a mobile production facility where we could go to each market with this big tractor trailer and a team of people and produce what became Wynk in each market that we sold. And, in that meeting, I kind of roughed out the numbers, gave an estimate of what I thought it would cost to build the first unit and a timeline. And in that meeting, we decided to do it. So we were in St. Thomas at the time at Sean's office in the Virgin Islands. I flew back to Pennsylvania and started building this system. That's really how we started. So, the premise of the business was, let's solve this technical problem. And solving the technical problem was useless if you didn't have a brand to produce. And so we created Wynk. But that initial system, the tractor trailer, was pretty wild. I came back to Pennsylvania. I'm like, Jesus Christ, what did I sign myself up for? I told Sean it would take 2 months to build and have running. And so I got to work. And the lead times for traditional beverage equipment are really long, well beyond 2 months. So the only option was search the used markets, and Facebook Marketplace, some of the beverage equipment marketplaces. But I ended up okay, step one, what platform do you put it on? Is it a box truck? Is it a semi truck? Is it a flatbed? But I found just a random guy. It may have actually been through Facebook Marketplace, and he had a 53-foot flatbed tractor trailer with a rolling tarp. So instead of having rigid walls, it actually had a retractable tarp structure, which is perfect for this because you put all the equipment on there and you need to be able to clean it. And getting in there inside a normal tractor trailer would be very hard. But with this, you just open the whole thing up. And so I flew out to Detroit to meet with this guy, looked at it, looked pretty good. It was all covered in snow, and bought it on the spot. Had somebody pick it up and drive it home. And that's really where it started. And then it was collecting all the pieces. But yeah, to give a sense of like what was on this tractor trailer, it was, for carbonated beverages in a can, seems easy, just put the liquid in and seal it. But there's a lot of challenges to carbonate water. It needs to be cold. The colder the water is, the better it absorbs CO2. And so if you're running a canning line at a reasonable rate, that's a lot of water to cool down. So you need a big chiller, and couldn't find a traditional beverage chiller. So I got a big air conditioning unit and converted it to get cold enough for liquid. So we had this huge chiller mounted to the front of the trailer. Then the next issue was, it's great you have a chiller, but you have to power it. And the power needed to pull that much heat out of water and make it cold is pretty huge. And none of the facilities that we'd ultimately partner with were set up for beverage. They didn't have huge utilities. I was like, all right, well, we'll just make it self-sufficient. So we got a big 80 kilowatt generator. And I found one that was mounted on a trailer, was meant for like towing behind a vehicle and moving from site to site. So we ripped that thing off the trailer and mounted it on our big tractor trailer. And then in order to make the liquid, you need big batch tanks. So I got this basically like a 3-stage dairy tank insulated. So it had 3 500-gallon tanks with mixers in them. And that was from a dairy farm. Mounted that on there and got mixers, like electric mixers built in. So then you could fill them with water, add your flavor, mix it and batch it. And then the next issue is you have to get carbon dioxide into the liquid. So one, you need carbon dioxide. These cannabis facilities don't really have a hookup for that. So we mounted big dewars that store super cold liquid CO2. Then we had a source of carbon dioxide. You need a carbonator, which is just a machine that takes your like flow of liquid, the product, cools it, and then injects carbon dioxide. Then you need a kill step, to kill any microbial. So there's another machine that injects an additive that it's not a preservative, but it kills any microbial growth in the liquid. Then there was the sort of big problem, which was, we had everything on the trailer to make the flavored, cooled, carbonated liquid. But then you have to get it in a can and get a canning line that'll fit in facilities not made for beverage. So I went out and found a pretty small format canning line that needed significant modification to make it mobile and portable and easy to take apart and put back together. So I bought that, rebuilt it. And then I think, the hardest problem with all of this is you need a way to get the THC into the drink without the THC leaving the building. So we, ultimately we partnered with license holders in each market that had facilities. And a lot of these were grow facilities or processing facilities where they turn the plants into final products. And they might have like an extra room or a closet or something small, a hallway to produce in. Definitely not big enough to fit huge batch tanks. So the batch tanks had to stay outside. The challenge is, well, you can't take the THC and put it in the batch tank. So how are you going to get in the liquid precisely? So I designed a little portable machine, and there's a hose that ran from the trailer, which would stay outside into the building. So it'd go like through a doorway, or we'd drill a hole in the wall to the canning line. But right before the canning line inside the building, it's just this machine you fill with THC. And then as the liquid's going past to the canning line, it just injects precise amounts. So that was the first system. The big challenge was validating it all. We could make beverages successfully. We did that within the 2-month deadline with an insane amount of pain. But then there was, a whole other challenge of how do you know that it's dosing it right? And I'm like, well, you just get a machine to test for THC. So I had somebody find one and they're like, yeah, this is great. The manufacturer says it'll test THC. I'm like, good, buy it. So we got that and it showed up in like 15 boxes. It turned out to be a, high performance liquid chromatograph, like analytical chemistry instrument, super complicated. That turned into almost as big of a project as the trailer, because we basically had to replicate the state labs for potency testing. So we went down this huge rabbit hole, learning how to test potency for beverage. And once we figured that out, validated the doser was working right, and we were on our way.
That was like incredible. I just want to say that's an amazing journey, man.
Yeah, and I could share some good photos with you guys of this system. It's a pretty serious rig. But ultimately, we'd load everything needed to do the production would fit on this one tractor trailer. And then we'd drive to like Arizona with it, get a forklift, pull the canning line off, put it in the building, hook everything up, and we'd be on our way. But while I was building that whole system, Casey and Sean were pretty busy trying to figure out a brand and, you know, a whole premise for the product. And Wynk is what we landed on. It looked a lot different than it looks now, but the formulations and the product were very much the same as what you see today.
So at this point in the episode, you have heard a lot about Wynk. You know, Wynk, the seltzer with a wink of THC that gives you a light, bubbly buzz that's enjoyable any night of the week. It's balanced with a perfect 1-to-1 balance of THC and CBD. It's light with 0 calories, 0 sugar, and no alcohol. And it'll hit you in 10 to 15 minutes, which means you don't have to wait. And you can take that relaxation level from a 6 to at least a 7 or an 8 pretty darn quick. So if you want to start sipping on some Wynk, make sure to redeem the special offer on their website. That's www.drinkwynk.com, www.drinkwynk.com, and make sure to use code DU30 for 30% off and free shipping. We're drinking Wynk. Wynk. We are drinking Wynk. We're drinking it all night long. I appreciate you for hanging for this brief intermission. And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Wow, that is incredible. That is quite the process. So I'm curious, like, because that is quite the investment in an idea, right? And so like I'm very curious, as all of that was happening and you're working through these things and making decisions and oh, got to have a way to inject the THC, got to do this, got to do that. Oh, we'll just get this there. We'll just get this there. How are you doing? I can only imagine there were, you know, certain potential doubts, or was there very little of that? And you were just like, no, this is going to work.
Man, I remember
this is it. We got to figure it out. I'd love to hear a little bit about, you know, maybe your journey through that.
Yeah, it was definitely sleepless for sure. I do remember pretty clearly, like I'd say that first tractor trailer was maybe 3/4 of the way done. Most of the equipment was placed, and none of this equipment is designed to travel over the road. These things are meant to be installed in a facility. And I looked at it and, you know, I originally spitballed like $750,000 to build this, 2 months. We were on track for, you know, the budget, but that's a lot of money. And most of that was spent. And I looked at it, I'm like, Jesus Christ. The thought of this going all over the country and things not breaking scared the hell out of me. And I think that was like probably like most emotionally impactful moment of the whole thing, was getting pretty close to the end and then just realizing like you're at the very bottom of the hill of challenge. Now we have to make this thing work in all the markets around the US reliably. You know, in the dispensary channel, you produce the product, but it has to go to state accredited labs for testing, and they test everything. Potency's got to be within a certain range. There's microbial, heavy metals, pesticides, everything's got to be perfect. And here we were, you know, early days relying on this like pretty crazy system with a million things going on to work right every single time. And it didn't matter what our opinion was on the product. Ultimately, the lab has the final say. So that scared the hell out of me early on. But I felt pretty good because we finished the system and we were getting ready for our first run, which was in Ohio, starting from Pennsylvania. It was like, well, that's good. The first market's not that far. But like, we may as well take this thing for a quick run around and make sure nothing falls off. So we hooked it up to a semi, and I hopped in the cab, and I was like, just, you know, don't be gentle. If anything's going to break, I want to see it now. The guy ended up driving through a ditch. So this whole system like bounced through this big ditch. And I was like, fuck me. We took it back and fired it up, and it worked perfectly. I was like, well, if we can survive that, we're in pretty good shape.
Oh, I'd say that's a solid test run right there. Let's just get that shit out of the way. And yeah,
the guy did it right. He definitely put it through its paces. But we, ultimately we opened up 10 markets in the first year, 10 different states. And we did 1 million cans in the first year. I mean, I tell you tons of stories of issues on the road, but we never failed to complete a run. We usually finished the run in time. It took like a serious team of very talented people to keep that system running. but it worked great, and it still works today. Amazing.
That's incredible, because again, like just wear and tear, and you're making it from scratch. You're coming up with it. It's like, this is going to work. Then
Yeah.
it's kind of on all the prep that I put into it right now. But I imagine that process, it's often the same thing that we go through all the time. Like, you have all these doubts and fears and thoughts. Oh my God, anything could happen, so on and so forth. But you can't really do anything about them except just focus on what you're doing. Right. And it's actually really hard to do that while you're dwelling on all those fears. So I imagine that in itself, because again, I've worked on projects that went on for years, just ongoingly, and it required me to learn this and then this and then this and then this. I imagine a lot of this you had no experience with. What is your background in cannabis as a whole? Because I imagine they're not smoking a bunch of weed at Tesla.
No, not smoking a bunch of weed at Tesla, at least on my team. My background's really engineering. I worked for some of the bigger tech companies. Like, I was at SpaceX for a bit, and I was working on the landing leg structure for the Falcon 9 very early on, prior to them having a successful launch of that rocket. I worked at Google for a little while, working on manufacturing for optics. So like really precise assemblies of very delicate optics, but good experience working with machines and designing, in that case, robotics. And then at Tesla, I was very deep in battery design. And the challenge there was just creating like a super energy dense battery pack for a car that is safe in a crash. Because you pack all that energy into a small space, it's very volatile. And so a lot of interesting like mechanical, thermal, and electrical issues there. But I came out of that actually to help Casey, one of the co-founders, with his distillery business, and came back to help with some interesting beverage bottle inventions, like the most complicated spirits bottle you've ever seen in your life. It's got like 30 parts in it. A bunch of those parts are moving. It was a bizarre project, but interesting nonetheless. And I kind of came back with the intent of trying to do something with Casey, and we ultimately landed on this. So anyways, my background is fairly strong in engineering, and that's what made this whole cannabis world so fascinating, especially on the beverage side. But the other side of it is, I didn't come into cannabis looking to initially create a brand, and I didn't come into cannabis because I was a big consumer. It came in because we just saw like an interesting opportunity to create a product. And when we started experimenting with this product and formulating it, it was really clear, like, this is a great product. Whether you like cannabis or not, this is a good product at a low dose and very approachable. So none of the founders, Casey, Sean, or I, were big cannabis users. And I think that's part of what made this so compelling when we made the first samples, is like, wow, we'd all been high before, but this was very different. And much more the experience we all wanted.
That's awesome. And it's really cool when it's a reflection of your own experience. Like, you're actually built a product and it works because it works for you. And there's
Exactly.
a lot of people out there, as much as the cannabis industry, and there is still, as much as it's the side of like the negative stigma and whatnot, there's also the side of like people who are hardcore cannabis users who thinks, you're not a real stoner if you can't handle a 50 to 100 milligram edible. It's like, all right, what are we doing here? And it's kind of like both sides holding on to their perception of what's right. And so it's really cool that you're finding a middle ground. That I've definitely found myself in the same boat, because I'm not, growing up, I was very straight edged, hardcore rule follower. Never would have thought. I thought, mushrooms and cannabis were equatable to black tar heroin and, crack. Basically, like that's where I came out of. So it's cool to find that middle ground, but to find something too that works for you. And I know for me, like a lot of my content and things I've done here, it's been expressions of where I'm at, and it allows for so much more enthusiasm. It's like, no, I know this works because I've done it, because I've used it, because it's impacted me and my life, and how much more of an authentic place that can come from, and while still being able to expand. And
I mean, the interesting kind of funny thing for our story is, I think we kind of naturally progressed through the same path that we want consumers to. We came in non-cannabis users, we formulated these low dose drinks, found a place for them, and we got that into the market with Wynk, and heard the feedback of some of the dispensary consumers wanting a higher dose product. So we listened and we created it. But in doing so, we kind of progressed from the super low dose Wynk to trying the higher dose beverages. 25 milligrams is like crazy for me, but it was interesting trying it because I'm like, nah, there's a place for this. Like the right occasion is really fun. And so kind of dip my toes into the higher dose beverages, and we continue to produce higher and higher dose products, but we ultimately went through the same sort of cannabis progression as we hope, many consumers will go through.
Again, I am definitely going to have to try one of these higher dose ones. The 100 sounds really interesting for sure. We have retreats regularly down in the States, and so it'd be great to get a case and share that with our guests.
No, we'd love to
sure.
Love to get you some samples.
That said, how has the integration with the cannabis culture been for you? Because I know it's a very different kind of industry. There's a lot of different kinds of characters in terms of not just growers, but people who are bud tenders, people who own the companies, people who've been in the legacy industry forever, and some of them are quite quirky. It's not exactly like a rigid office environment. How has that transition been for you?
Yeah, I mean the challenge in this industry is everybody's a startup. Like the industry is so new. There are big players and there are small players, but ultimately everybody's trying to figure it out, including the regulators. And so our challenge has always been working with just so much change everywhere. And, we integrate very closely with our partners in markets that we sell through dispensary, and we have to work together to find solutions to all these issues. But it's been great. So many of our partners are awesome to work with, super creative, very tactful, working within the regulations. And ultimately, we'll always try and push the regulators to do what we think is right for the category. Not always best for us, but ultimately the right thing for the category. And it's been fun working with them as well. In a lot of the markets, the regulators are fascinated by what we're doing. Early days, like for our first run in Ohio, trying to explain to the regulators what we're trying to do and get it approved, it's so outside of what they're used to seeing. Tractor trailers and equipment outside, equipment inside, product flowing through the building, THC dosing, but we never got rejected in any market we wanted to enter. Ultimately, the regulators worked with us and fully understood the system that we operated, and allowed it for good reason. We're complying with the regulations. The THC doesn't leave the building, and the product's third-party tested when it's all said and done. So it's been fun. There's a bunch of markets that we went to that the regulators asked to come out for our first run and see the operation. That was always fun. The feedback was always great. Usually a lot of laughs. It's just the early days, it was so crazy. Like this system was wild. For most of the runs, we'd have to bring our own water. So we'd have a tractor trailer full of water. And then we'd bring the mobile production system. And then we had another tractor trailer full of all the materials, all the cans. So we'd show up to these, in a lot of cases, small facilities with 3 tractor trailers and a team of 6 people. And we'd be in and out in a day. And we'd leave them with 20,000 finished cans, just like crazy. But as we grew and we added new markets, we started to run out of capacity. You just can't move the trailer and the team that fast, and you can't have people on the road every week. So we built a second one with a bunch of, in theory, improvements. Some things turned out to be not so optimized, but we had 2 tractor trailers running and teams all over taking care of it. But it got to the point where we just couldn't scale it. Like too many challenges, keeping the regulators happy with the system, keeping the partners happy, kind of taking over their space for a day every month or so. And so there really became a need to streamline it and simplify. And that's where we actually got to some really interesting technology. And what we ended up doing was creating a system where we take a normal empty can, you can buy it from any supplier, and run it through a machine that we have. And that machine just pretty much puts a hole punch in the bottom of the can. So we always joke, you take a perfectly good can and you pop a hole in it. But then we'd insert a valve. So your can won't have it because it's hemp derived. But if you buy a can from a dispensary, it would. But yeah, take a normal can, put a hole in it, put a little one-way valve in it. The consumer would never notice. It's very small and dead center in the bottom of the can. And then with that, we can take those empty cans and run them through our canning line at our facility, and we'd fill them with undosed product. So the can would look like Wynk. It would taste like Wynk, but it had no THC in it. And then we built a small dosing machine that was about, we still use it today. It's about 4 foot by 4 foot. And it operates much like a vape cartridge filler. So it has a head that moves, and you just load a tray of cans, of 24 cans into it. And then it's all automated. So it pulls the tray in, it goes down, it injects just THC into that can, and it'll do all the cans. And that's really it. Like, you go from this tractor trailer system traveling all over the country to just placing these small dosers into the facilities. And all you have to do is plug it into the wall. It's a 120 volt outlet, just like like a computer. And all the cans, all the hard stuff's done. Run them through, dose them, and we're on our way. So that's what the whole company evolved to, using that system. It's our own design. We built it ourselves. It's patented, and it's been approved in all our markets. So that's what we use today. It saves a facility build out for beverage. To do it right, it's probably $5 million. To get it licensed, probably a year and a half. And so instead of all that, we just take this small 4x4 machine, place it in an existing facility, and then 2 people can run 50 to 70 cans a minute through it. Crazy. So that's what we evolved to. And that's how we continue to produce Countdown in the dispensary market.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think very, very just reflective of the agility and the shifts and the changes of the market being able to use something like that. Because you think about most beverage companies, it's like mostly just super big companies, right? Like PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, they're very settled. It's an industry that hasn't changed. There's been no new laws on soda besides the one I think they put in New York where they banned like 32-ounce cups, the Big Gulp or something like that. There's very few shifts, and so it's cool to be able to shift that much and just continue to allow things to play out and just adapt with things, because I'm sure it's changing very frequently with the laws and whatnot. But
right. Yeah, I think it just goes back to being agile and working with all these different parties and all these different markets. Like, at the end of the day, we thought, carbonated canned beverage, that's the right product for the consumer. So we wanted to keep that. It'd be way easier to go to a small plastic bottle, but this is just like a great product. So we wanted to keep that, but also satisfy all the challenges in our markets of operating those crazy mobile production facilities and simplify. So we just adapted as quickly as we could and produced this solution that really answered, all the questions. Like, how do you make this streamlined? How do you make it so we don't disrupt somebody else's operation? How do you make the regulators understand it better? Just simplified everything. And then from our standpoint, you're not dealing with exploding generators in Arizona. You have a little small machine that's very simple and reliable, way easier.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense for sure. One thing about being part of this industry, and I know a lot of people have communicated this here on the show and the time that I was working within the industry, you end up dealing with that old stigma from a lot of people. And so I imagine transferring into this industry, creating the product, despite, again, how technical it might be and how low dose it might be, I imagine you were getting a little bit of blowback from people in your life at some point. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, or were they just cool with it?
Yeah, it's funny. I think the funniest example that probably anybody in this industry has is the story of their parents. There's so much stigma around marijuana when I was in high school, and it stayed out of my life mostly because my parents pushed me in that direction. I'm glad they did at the time. But it's interesting now. They live in Montana. They're about 20 miles south of the Canadian border, right by Glacier National Park. That whole community where they live is obsessed with Wynk. And a lot of them have kicked alcohol. My parents like it. All their friends like it. And so I think that's that's really it. We need to get the product in people's hands to try and see the benefits, and that this isn't like a stoned, lazy person product. This is it can be part of a lifestyle, and it can really meet you where you are. If you want it for a social activity, it's great for it. If you want it for enjoying the outdoors, it's really good for it. If you want it to sleep, people find it helpful. It's very versatile product. And once you get it in people's hands and they understand the right story, the stigma goes away pretty quickly.
For sure. It's really like an amplifier in a lot of ways, THC, I find. And one of my favorite parts is the lack of a hangover as well. Like, I was a a big drinker in college because it was such a big part of our culture. And that's kind of like how I'm able to say that without being like, I was just pretty anxious in social situations and used alcohol as a quick little fix for that. And I find that, at least for me in my experience, THC, like I got to do a little bit, at least some of the work when I do relax, and a lot of times like a lot of the work. And so it's cool that it is a big part of the shift because, you know, we know that alcohol is arguably like the worst thing for us, maybe in the world, right? And it's legal and it's on every corner, and yet there's still these thoughts about cannabis. A lot of times, just because someone maybe had one experience and they got really anxious and paranoid, or they just grew up hearing stigmas. We were on one of our Patreon calls earlier, and we were sending over some memes of like Jay sent in a meme of something about just all of the negative sort of stigmas from, I don't know, like 30s, 40s, 50s, and signs from it, and just how, you know, cannabis makes you a violent person and it'll make you crazy and go insane and all this stigma. And it's just completely unfounded. You know, like what's actually the impact? Like it doesn't make people really violent at all, right? If anything, like the only downside is you're going to maybe feel a little more anxious and paranoid, but if anything, maybe you'll just stay in your room instead of going outside. And yet there's still sort of this underlying sense and feeling. And so, you know, I appreciate you guys for being out there and kind of being that gateway to relaxation for people, because it's a small enough jump a lot of times that it's not this jarring experience. And once you dip your toe in, you're like, okay, you know, maybe a little more next.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, you know, to your point, we launched in Illinois the end of last year into Chicago. And I think, you know, right before the holidays, we did a launch party there at a bar, and the bar was serving Wynk. It's cool. Many bars are serving Wynk on premise now. But at the end of the night, when everybody left, I was talking to the bartender. She's like, "These products are amazing for us." I was like, "Why?" She's like, "People are so happy." Like the customers on the other side of the bar, they're so happy, as opposed to alcohol where people, you know, can get aggressive or bizarre. So that is interesting feedback that I think, you know, if anybody should know the effects of alcohol, it would be a bartender. But interesting hearing that the early stories of their experience serving Wynk.
Yeah, that's something I can certainly vouch for. A crowd full of people who are high is very different than a crowd full of people who are drunk. So that's amazing, because I know that's a big part of it. You know, there's the question about smoking. There's even a question about vaping. You know, there's some danger about that. And so the idea of just being able to have a drink and just normalize it in that way is fantastic, especially if we're able to find it at a liquor store. Like if it's just straight up an option, it's like, huh, well, I could get high. And you just go and do that instead. I love it, man. I think that's just the best thing. Before we wrap up here, I just wanted to ask, because I like to ask everybody a question about their journey. There are other people out there who are possibly thinking about trying to tackle a very large project, one that might require them to learn new things and rescale and maybe face those doubts and those fears and not sleep a whole lot and whatnot. As somebody who's faced that meat grinder yourself, is there any suggestions that you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's all perseverance. Like we build plans every month and they always change. And a lot of times it's extremely challenging to adapt, but it's all perseverance and not giving up. I mean, we had so many insanely hard battles getting from A to B on this. In the beginning, we came in, you know, we're just going to make a mobile production facility, put liquid in a can and sell it. It turned out to be so much harder than we ever thought. But yeah, you just can't give up if the idea is right. And I think in this case it is. You just have to see it through. So, you know, we'll continue to go, and it's going to work for us, but it's never easy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I resonate with that a lot. Of what we're doing is us at Dualistic Unity, you guys at Wynk, there's a shifting mentality. And so you almost are forced into being adaptable, but there's an exciting component of being more so on the forefront of those shifts, as much as there's the, you know, difficulty and you know, facing things you never would have thought you may face in your life. It's exciting because there's that sort of equal and opposite trade-off as you go. Right. It's like the more difficult, usually the the better the payoff as you
Yeah.
go.
And the other side of it is, you know, when you go through it, when you go through the trenches and you come out the other side with a success, like that satisfaction, you can't replicate it anywhere. So we continue to have, you know, thousands of these small wins. It's absolutely brutal getting there, but when you have them, it's just like, man, that's what keeps it really fun. So we like the battle. We'll keep fighting it. But you know, really good across the board just to see the market starting to accept these products and really give us a chance to get it to consumers and let the consumers say what the rules should be.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And being able to have that impact and that influence, and, you know, just helping to break down the stigma too is exciting to see. So I really appreciate you joining us, Angus. This has been a lot of fun. Where can people find Wynk? Social media, website, anything you want to share or plug here?
Yeah, you know, the markets are always evolving, and so we constantly add new states and different channels that you can buy these products through. But if you go to drinkwynk.com, it's DRINKWYNK.com. There's a store locator there, and that shows all the retail locations that we sell through. It also shows all the states that we can ship online to. So a lot of people are surprised you can actually buy these products online and have them delivered to your house. And then for Countdown, countdowndrink.com, and there's a store locator there as well. We only sell Countdown through dispensaries now, but you'll see the markets on the website, and we'll continue to update them as we add more.
That is awesome. That's fantastic. And again, I want to just go back quickly to your point about perseverance. You know, like it's going through it that you really start to gain some self-knowledge. And that's not an idea of who you are. It's just a deep down recollection in your bones of how much shit you can face.
Yeah.
And that's really it. It's not the same as confidence. It's almost like you've just kind of been weathered, you know, through going through shit. You're like, I know how much I can take. Go ahead and bring it. And you just keep throwing yourself into the fire. So Angus, I want to say thank you for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really look forward to having you back on the show at some point in the near future, hopefully. To our listener, thank you for joining us for this fantastic discussion. As always, go out and check out this product and try it in your own life, assimilate it into your activities. Go for a jog. Hell, meet with Andrew in New York and have a drink. It's absolutely worth checking out. Angus, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the time. It's been fun.
Blast. Bye, everyone.
Cool. Take care.